Today's daf we're going to be learning is Yoma daf Vav. This is the daf for Shabbat. Today's daf is dedicated by Hannah and Michael Petrakowski for the Refuah Shlema of Yaakov Chaim ben Saada, a man who was an awesome presence in his family. May he heal from COVID and return to his family in full health. Refuah Shlema. We're going to review a little bit what we saw from yesterday, that there's two opinions about whether the avnei, the belt, that the Kohen wore and the Kohen Gadol wore, they both had this as part of their clothes. Was this made of the same material, both for the regular Kohanim, which was made, and for the Kohen Gadol? The Kohen Gadol we know was made from a mixture of different materials and colors. And the question is, was the regular one made of just linen, or was it the same as the Kohen Gadol's? So now we're going to have a review on how they get it from the verses, starting from 3 lines from the bottom of the previous page. Let's start 6 lines or 7 lines from the bottom of the previous page. Manda amal Aharon va'achar kach banav, the one who says that was also a question of how did they get dressed? Did they get dressed at the same time or one after the other? So Manda amar Aharon va'achar kach banav, first Aaron got dressed, then his sons, dichtiv, as it says in the verses when it describes in the Miluim, in Vayikra chapter 8, it says, Vayachgor otam ba'avnet. Oto, first Aharon ba'avnet, then Hadrokti Vayachgor otam avnet. Then it said that they got the others dressed. So again, looks like Aharon got dressed first. Again, we're talking specifically about this belt, and then his sons. And that's because it says Vayachgor otam. Umanda amar Aharon ubanav bevatachat, the one who says all at once, dichti v'chagarta otam, because they're focusing on the verse in Shmot Kaftet, in the commandment to do it, where it says, and they all dress with this belt, which sounds like all at the same time. So lamanda amar Aharon ubanav bevatachat. So now what does each one do with the other verse? If you say it all was at the same time, haktiv vayachgor oto ba'avnit, but it says he first, and then, in other words, what do you do with the verses in Leviticus, Vayikra, which say in the Miluim, in the inauguration, first Aaron, then the sons? Amar Lacha, he would explain to you, the reason why the verses split them up in the inauguration was to teach you that it's not the same avneit. The one that the Kohen Gadol had was made of different colors. There it says in the verse that it's made of these different colors, Tolat, Shani, Vashesh. Here, if you look in Rashi, he says, Ve'et avnet shesh mazar tchelet v'argeman. Okay, it was a combination of these threads. We saw these threads in Masechet Shkalim, if you remember, with the mashzar, how many threads were in the parochet. So it was a mixture of these colored threads. And therefore, it was not the same. He had this colorful one, and they had a different one, and therefore it says, they dressed Aaron and they dressed the sons, meaning they each wore a different type of belt. Ulamanda amar Aharon v'achar kach banav, the one who said Aaron and then his sons, v'aktiv v'chagarta otam avnet. But doesn't it say v'chagarta otam avnet? What do you do with the verse? If you say it happened one after the other, why in Shmot, when it describes it, in the book of Exodus, it says, when it's describing the commandment of the clothes of the Kohen and the Kohen Gadol, it says, and they all dress with the avnei, as if they did it together. So Amar Lacha, Hahu Kamash Malan Avnei Tosha Kohen Gadol, Zeu Avnei Tosha Kohen Edyot. They wanted to tell you it's the same one. That's why it says Vayachgor otam. They both had the same belt. Okay, and therefore, the one that they had was not a simple one made of white linen or some kind of linen, but it was actually this colorful belt. Vayachgor otam. So vayachgor oto avnet, vayachgor otam avnet, vayachgor otam lamali. So now, why does it say him and then them? Shma mina Aharon v'achar kach banav, and then that proves first one and then the other. Ubevat achat mi mishkach hala. Now we want to know, practically speaking, how did Moshe dress them both at the same time? It's not possible. So they say lo tzricha de'akdim. What it means is, okay, now there's a lot of different interpretations of what this milah akdim means, okay, meaning if he did it, okay, we'll say, it's a little unclear, akdim means he did it first. So Rashi says, lo bevat achat mamash kamar, it didn't mean exactly all at the same time. Ela zer charzem, in Rashi Gibor matchil lo tzricha de'akdim, Okay, it's around the same line right there in Rashi. But beseder echad hayu v'lo hifsik beged echad b'intayim. Meaning, hilbish la'aharon kol b'gadav v'lo chagar otam avneit. He put all the clothes on Aaron, didn't put on the avneit. Then achar kach hilbish panav mechnasayim k'tonet u'mitznefet. Then he put all the clothes on the sons, and then he put the avneit on Aaron and the avneit on the sons, so that they all got their avneit put on together. There's a debate. Rashi makes it sound like they put all the 8 clothing of the Kohen Gadol on without the avneit, and it's 7 of them, and then did the 3 of the others, and then added the avneit onto both. Some people say, no, it can't possibly be. It makes more sense that first they dressed Aaron with the basic Kohen Gadol, the basic Kohen clothes, the same as the sons, then put the avneit on, because it doesn't make sense to put the avneit, which is the regular Kohen Gadol, the regular priest's clothes, and then not finish. In other words, to put all the clothes of the Kohen Gadol, the special clothes, before putting the avneit on, which is a basic garment, because it's something that the sons wore also, all the other Kohanim wore also, doesn't make so much sense. So therefore, there's this debate. Did everything go on except the avneit, or was it everything means everything that the regular Kohanim wear, Aaron will wear, then the sons, then the avneit goes on both, and then the Kohen Gadol puts on all the extras after that. So that's a minor debate within this whole thing. But the main point is they didn't actually get dressed at the same time. It was just the avneit was put on one after the other, not that Aaron got fully dressed and then the sons got fully dressed. Okay, now we're back to Mafrushim Kohen Gadol, to which the Gemara asks, again, we're back to this first line in the Mishnah, that we separate the Kohen Gadol 7 days before. Okay, there's the Daf Mishalahem this past week was all about this idea of separating, and specifically separating from the wife, and issues about zugiyut and relationships, and the idea of separating. Anyway, it's a good vlog if you haven't yet heard it. So you can go on our site or on our Facebook page and listen. Definitely a worthwhile listen. So now the Gemara asks, Lama mafrishim? Why does he separate? Now this is a bit of a strange question. Didn't we spend a lot of time in the beginning a few days ago discussing why he separates? So the Gemara asks, Lama mafrishim kidekam lina? What do you mean? We already explained. Ila Rabbi Yochanan keditle. Rabbi Yochanan learned it out from the Miluim, the inauguration days, and Rabbi Lakish learned it out from the receiving of the Torah and the Har Sinai. So I don't know why you're asking. So they say, well, Hachi Kamar, this is really what we meant to ask. Mi beito lama peresh. Why does he have to distance himself from his wife? And this is why I said to listen to their vlog, because they talk about the idea of separation. Why does he have to separate from his wife? So Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera Omer, Shema timtza ishto safek nida v'yavo alea. We're worried that maybe he'll go home. If he's home, he'll sleep with his wife. They'll have relations. She'll end up at maybe accidentally not realizing she was in nida. They'll have relations when she's in nida, and he'll have to go into nida. He'll have to go not into nida, but he is called a bo'el nida, one who sleeps with a woman who's menstruating, and he will have to separate from her. He'll have to not separate from her. He'll have to be tamei, impure, for 7 days. So now he'll obviously have to separate from her because she's in nida, but that's a separate thing. The issue now is he can't do the work avoda in the temple because he's impure. So now they say, Atu b'rashia askina. Oh, so first I actually said it wrong, because it says here, Shema timtza ishto safek nida. Maybe his wife will be in a doubtful situation of nida, possibly she's in nida, and he'll sleep with her anyway, and then he'll become bo'al nida. But they say, what, we're worried about the Kohanim being bad people, that they're going to know that their wives are in a doubtful situation, they're going to sleep with them anyway. So, oh no, maybe the issue is he won't think his wife is in nida. He doesn't know that she's menstruating. She doesn't know that she's menstruating. What will happen? They'll have relations, and then after she'll find blood, and then it's possible that he'll be considered, at that point, if she sees blood after, and we're going to discuss exactly in what situation, it will be retroactively that he ended up having relations with his wife when she was menstruating. And that will create a situation of a bo'el nida. So Rabbanan Kemeda Rav Chisda, the rabbi said this in front of Rav Chisda and said, Kiman, according to who does this go by? Ki Rabbi Akiva Amar nida mitamat bo'ala. They say, oh, it's like Rabbi Akiva, because not everybody thinks that this will happen, that this will be a problem. If, let's say, one has, let's talk some basics of nida. This comes up in the beginning of nida. In those days, people dealt a lot with items that that could become impure, that were going to be problematic, like truma or kudshim, sacrificial meat. The truma that was given to the kohanim had to be kept in sanctity. Now, for women, checks. The women used to do checks all the time. They would check to see if they were nida, because they were dealing with things that could become impure. So they needed to know their status all the time. And this is also not just for kohanim or people eating sacrifices, but even the rabbis and important people in those times, the prushim, as they're called. Why are they called prushim? They kept a high level of sanctity. They would treat things as if they were truma in their own house, regular produce. So therefore, they were very careful. So the women would check. Let's say a woman checks and she finds out she's menstruating. Now, what happens? Maybe she was already 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago, 20 minutes ago. So what do we do? So the law is that we assume we go back. There's a debate whether we go back 24 hours or to the last time she checked. In the end, we say it's a combination of both, right? If she checked within 24 hours, then we go back to the check. If not, then we go back 24 hours. So now, this is not for a Boel Nida. This is just for Kodshim and Truma, okay? And people who want to treat anything like Kodshim or Truma. It's not the case for a Boel Nida. So what are we worried about? If she finds out after that she was bleeding, what's the difference? We don't go retroactively and say, oh, 10 hours ago you were together. That means he's now going to be a Boel Nida. We don't say that, except that we're going to see that Rabbi Akiva holds that way. And that must be what we're worried about with this Kohen Gadol, and why we have to keep him away from his house for 7 days. Because if she finds out they were together and she finds out that she was menstruating, then we're going to go back 24 hours. That's what we're going to say right now. It goes according to Rabbi Akiva. We basically treat it the same, that it's going to go retroactive if she sees blood. Now we're going to assume, at least let's assume, it seems like 24 hours ago, within the past 24 hours, if they have relations, he's going to be considered a Boel Nida. So it must be only according to him and not according to the rabbis, who think that this only applies for Truma and Kodshim. To which they say, right, to Rabbanan, because if it's the rabbis, we don't say that she retroactively causes her husband to be impure. So now we're going to have a different explanation. This is what they said to Rav Chisda. And Rav Chisda said to him, no, I can explain it even according to the rabbis. How so? The rabbis disagree with Rabbi Akiva when we're talking about she checks later, let's say 10 hours later, right, up to 24 hours, then we're going to go retroactively. And on there, they really have a disagreement. But, however, they do agree, if immediately after having relations, achar means after, let's say, two things happen. In other words, they have relations and then they finished, and then she goes and walks down the hall and then checks. That's already achar. Then they have a debate. But immediately after, if she sees blood, then you have to assume that when they have relations, she already was menstruating. And then you can explain this issue in the Mishnah that he has to separate from her because of that concern, as Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera says, even according to the rabbis, because it could be immediately after she'll see blood, and then he will actually become a Boel Nida. So now they say, Amar Rabbi Zera. We're now going to have another machloket about this. So Rabbi Zera comes and infers from here, Shema Mina, from Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera. Again, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera said, Shema timtza ishto safek nida v'yavo aleha. Right? Maybe she'll be safek nido and he'll have relations with her. And that's why we want to separate him from his wife for 7 days. So Rabbi Zera says, Shema Mina boel nida eino kinida v'tovel b'yom. He now comes to another conclusion, totally not relevant to our situation of this Kohen Gadol, but we're talking now about if someone were to have relations with his wife while she was in nida, when does he go to the mikveh? Now, generally we say he's treated like the nida. A woman who's in nida goes to the mikveh at night. That's because the Torah says, Shiv'at yamim te'eh b'nidata. She needs to be in nida 7 days. Therefore, she can only go to the mikveh once those 7 days are complete. Now, she's the only one really, other than a woman who gives birth, who is compared to a nida. Otherwise, everybody goes to the mikveh in the morning or during the daytime, and then they wait for what we call harev shemesh till the sun sets, and then they're pure. So the question is, when does this Boel Nida go to the mikveh? Is he treated exactly like the nida because he kind of ends up with the laws of a nida upon him, or does he go in the morning just like everybody else? So Rabbi Zera says you can infer from here, in a minute we'll see how, that a Bo'el Nida is Eno Kinida v'Tovel B'Yom. He's not like a Nida in terms of when he goes to the mikveh. He's going to go to the mikveh during the day. If you say that he's like a Nida, Emat Tavil, when is he going to go to the mikveh? If he has to separate 7 days before, okay, I put this on the sheet so you can follow inside. Okay, if he has to go to the mikveh on, when would he go? At the end of 7 days. That would be so 7 days before, which would be starting from 3rd of Tishrei, 4th of Tishrei, 5th of Tishrei, 6th of Tishrei, 7th of Tishrei, 8th of Tishrei, 9th of Tishrei. That's your 7 days. Goes to the mikveh at night. What's the problem now? Well, the problem is if he goes to the mikveh at night, Ema Tavil Balalia. If he goes at night of the 9th, which is really the night of the 9th is already the 10th. How is he going to do the worship on the 10th, that next day? Doesn't he need to wait till the sun sets in order to be pure? Now, what happens? Normally, sunset makes you pure, right, after you went to the mikveh. But when sunset happened on the 9th at night, before the 10th, moving into the 10th, he hadn't yet gone to the mikveh. So in order to be able to take care of sacrificial items, and it's, again, a woman who's in nida goes to the mikveh and immediately she's fine for her husband. But when it comes, at least it sounds from this sugya, that when it comes to eating sacrificial meat, for example, or truma, she would have to wait till sunset of the next night because the night of the 10th is considered the day of the 10th, which would mean she'd need to wait for sunset. So he would also, and then the Kohen Gadol wouldn't be able to worship. And therefore, elalav shmamina bo'el nida, kinida. So comes Rabbi Zera and says, one can infer from here that a bo'el nida is not like a nida in terms of the when does one go to the mikveh. Rav Shimi min Nehardea Hamal, but Rav Shimi from Nehardea says no. Afilu tema bo'el nida knida. We've seen this afilu tema a few times today, right? We saw before. First, it was only Rabbi Akiva, right? What was it? What did we see? Rabbi Akiva, and then we said, oh no, afilu tema Rabbanan, right? You can also say it said afilu temu. It's the same thing. One can also explain it according to that approach. So likewise, we're going to see that here. You can even say bo'el nida knida. And then, how does he go to the mikveh then? He can't go to the mikveh on the night of the 10th. So what do we say? Go back to the beginning of the 7 days. We said 7 days. So we counted 7 days from the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th. That's 7 days. But if he separates from her a little bit of the 2nd of Tishrei, then that day will count already as his first day. There's a concept in Judaism called, in certain cases, miktzat hayom kikulo. Part of the day is considered a whole day. The main time we see this is in avelut. When someone's sitting shiva, part of days is already considered a whole day. That's why the first day where the burial is done, as long as it's done during the daytime and there's a little bit of time to sit shiva, that's already counted as a day. And the last day we get up from shiva in the morning. So therefore, what do we say here? Even if you say, so on Monday, we separate a little, he separates a little bit of time. Monday, that counts as day number 1. So 2nd of Tishrei is 1, 3rd of Tishrei is 2, 4th of Tishrei is 3, 5th is 4, 6th is 5, 7th is 6, 8th is 7th. Then he goes to the mikveh at night of the 9th. By the 9th of Harev Shemesh, he's fine. By the 10th, he's perfect. Good to go. So that's a second explanation. Meitive. Now we're going to bring a question, which is really also, second, now we're going to bring a question on Rav Shimi, okay, on what we just said from a Braita. Kol chayavei tefilot, this is what I told you before, tfilatam b'yom. Everyone who goes to the mikveh goes during the day, but except for nida v'yoledet tfilatam b'layla. So what do you see here? Only a nida, a woman who's menstruating, and a yoledet, a woman who gives birth, which sounds like nida'in, bo'el nida lo. It doesn't say bo'el nida on this list, someone who sleeps with a woman, has relations with a woman while she's in nida. So how do you explain that? So Rav Shimi will answer, nida v'choda'ati miribuya. It means a nida and anyone who comes from a nida. The bo'el nida, his tuma is from the nida herself. So when it says nida, it means nida and even someone who sleeps with a menstruating woman. Meitive, another question on Rav Shimi. Baal Keri, this is from a Mishnah. Baal Keri kimagash sheretz, one who sees a seminal emission is like one who touches a creepy crawler creature. Bo'el nida kitmemet, and one who sleeps with a woman who is menstruating is like a tmemet. So, my love, litfila, do we not mean here that a bo'el nida is like a tamemet in terms of when they go to the mikveh? When does a tamemet, one who becomes impure to a dead person, goes to the mikveh in the morning? So bo'el nida in the morning against Rav Shimi. So they say lo letumatan. No, it means a bo'el nida is 7 days, just like someone who is tamei lamet is 7 days. Someone who is impure to a dead person waits 7 days. That's what it means. Not when exactly in the 7 days or after the 7 days do they go to the mikveh, night or day. That's not the discussion. But then the Gemara says, no, letumatan, you want to say, the Mishnah is telling you a bo'el nida is like a tamei met, that it's 7 days, but that it says explicitly in the psukim. In the verses in the Torah, it says, Hai tumat shiva aktive, v'hai tumat shiva aktive, both by a person impure to a dead person and a person who has relations with a woman when she's menstruating. It says explicitly in the text that it's 7 days. So you don't need a Mishnah to tell you something that says in the text. And therefore, elalav l'tfilatan, it must be coming to say that's when they go to the mikvah. They go to the mikvah like it's my mate in the daytime, which means that this contradicts Rav Shimi's reading that they go to the mikvah at night. So again, the Gemara says, lo olam l'tumatan. Really, it is l'tumatan. It's to tell you 7 days. But what's really trying to tell you? Not actually, I shouldn't say 7 days. It's describing, it has the same type of tuma as a tumat mate. Why is it telling you that? Well, seife stricha. It needs it for the continuation, to tell you that for all intents and purposes, it's like tmei mate, except for, and here's the end of that Mishnah. In other words, that part of the Mishnah was obvious. It does tell you 7 days, but we knew it was 7 days. We didn't need it to tell us that. But what it's trying to say is in order to set up how they're different, first it says how they're similar, and then it's going to have this line in that Mishnah, which says, Ela shechamor mimenu bo'el nida, shemitame mishkav u'moshav b'tum'a kala l'tamei tumat ochlin u'mashkin. It set it up as a foil. First, it says they're the same, that they're 7 days, but they have this one difference. What's this difference? So a nida and a zava and a zav and all those kind of people have a special tumah called mishkav u'moshav. That means if they sit on something, let's say, okay, it always reminds me of the Princess and the Pea. The case they give is there's 10 mattresses, one on top of the other. And let's say for our intents and purposes, let's talk about a menstruating woman, sits on the top mattress. So she's only touching. Often tumah is transferred by touching. In this case, if she sits on the top mattress, she actually is mitame everything underneath. All the mattresses become impure. And in fact, they have the level of an av hatuma. So they can make someone who sits on it tameh. They can make someone who food that goes on it. They can make utensils that go on it. All of that. It's a high level of impurity. Now, tameh mate doesn't work that way. If someone who is in contact with a dead person sits on a mattress, on 10 mattresses, one on the other, only the one that they're touching becomes impure, not all the others. So therefore, what are they? Where does a bo'el nida stand in all this? So it's going to be not exactly like a nida, but also not exactly like a tamei mate. So how so? So let's read it again. Chamor mimenu bo'el nida. A bo'el nida is stricter than a tamei mate. Shemitame mishkavu moshav, that means by sitting, that means these 10 mattresses, one on top of the other. Bitum'a kala, with a lighter though tumah, not as severe as a menstruating woman, not going to become an avatuma, but l'tamei ochlinu mashkin. Those mattresses will all become what we call a rishon, which means that they can only pass on impurity, not to people and not to utensils, but to food and drink. So if the bo'el nida sat on all these mattresses, if any food comes in contact with those mattresses, the food will become impure. So that's how it's different from tamei mate, and that's why it's a l'tumatam, and not about when they go to the mikvah, but how many days and what its level of impurity is. And then it distinguishes it by saying, even though that was obvious, it now distinguishes it by saying how it's different. Tashma. Now we're going to bring a source that's the reverse. It's going to go against Rabbi Zera. Remember, Rav Shimi said they go to the mikvah like a nida at nighttime, and Rabbi Zera said they go to the mikvah in the daytime like anyone else who's like all regular tumas. So now we're going to have a contradiction against that. Tashma, titani Rabbi Chia, hazav v'hazava. Okay, this is the zav, someone who has a discharge, a man, which is a clear discharge. the zava is a bloody discharge from a woman when it's not the time of her period. Vehamitzorat, and a leper, male and female. Uboel nida, here we have our boel nida, one who has relations with a menstruating woman. Utmemet, tfilatan biyom. Nida violedet, tfilatan balayla. Sorry, my mistake. This is against Rav Shimi. Sorry, my mistake. This is another contradiction against Rav Shimi. I said that wrong because here it says tfilatan balayla and bayom, and Rav Shimi said no tfilatan balayla. And in fact, they say to Yuvta, this is in fact difficult because it seems to go right against Rav Shimi. Okay, so now we're moving on from here. Now the Gemara asks, "Va'ad sha'atam mafrisho mitumat beito." Just want to check one thing here because I said something. Second. Okay. So now, one sec. Okay. So now we're going to move on and have another question. Until now, we've been worried, separate from his wife for 7 days because maybe she'll be in Nida and he'll become a Boel Nida. But there's another, we just brought up that there's another Tuma, which is 7 days. And why aren't we worried about him coming in contact with a dead body? Right? Why don't we separate him from other kind of impurities? Now, you might say, well, he's in this Lishkat Paradrim. There shouldn't be much death there. But it's clear that we're saying Mi Beito from his wife, and we're not talking about from Tumat Meit. So why is that? And this, for those who learn Psachim, this is going to remind you. Zot omeret tumat hamet hutrahi b'tzibur. What does this show you? If we're not worried about him becoming impure to a dead body, it must mean because he has a communal obligation. And anytime there's a communal obligation, Tuma is overridden. And there we have, right? Tuma is hutra, it's permitted. So therefore, even if he becomes tameh to a dead body, it's fine. He can still do the avodat Yom Kippurim. Right? Hard to imagine. We'd have a Kohen who's impure doing the avodah. But because it's a tzibur, it's a public thing, it sounds like it would be. So Ravina Amal, afilu tema tumat hamet dechuyahi b'tzibur, tumat hamet lo shchicha, tumat beito shchicha. He answers and he says, again, this afilu tema, we seem to be seeing it a lot today, which is no, you could even say, okay, now wait, I forgot to point out, this is very important. Tuma hutra and tuma dechuya are two different things. I should clarify right now. I forgot that they clarified already right away. When we say that if someone becomes tameh, or we talked about on Pesach, if the majority of the people become tameh, and we saw this whole machloket also in Pesachim, which is, right, in that case, if the majority of people are impure, you can actually bring the korban Pesach, even though the majority of the people or the majority of the kohanim are impure. Now, there were two options. Either we say tuma hutra, tuma is permitted, and therefore, we don't have to worry. It's permitted entirely. So it doesn't matter, right? If you'd say the opposite, which is tuma dechuya means we can override it, but it's still there. If you override something, it means it's still there, but we're allowing you to override it. So let's understand it now inside. Ravina says, even the assumption of Rava was to say that if tuma's dechuya and it's overridden, but it's still there, then we want to try to avoid it as best as possible. And let's make sure he separates from tumat meit also. But since it doesn't say that, it seems as we obviously don't care, and therefore it's hutra, permitted entirely. It's as if it's not there. It's if we erase it almost. We just don't notice it. So now Ravina says, afilu tema tumat hamet dechuyahu b'tzibur. No, you could even say overridden tumat hamet lo shchicha and tumat beito shchicha. You could just say very simply, we don't have to separate him 7 days because it's just rare. It's not so common. His wife, that's much more common. But that's not so common. Even his wife, it's not the most common thing that you're going to have relations and then she's going to see blood immediately after. So it's a good question why they think that's more common, but it seems to be they think that that's more common, at least the possibility of that. Certainly according to Rabbi Akiva, where she could have menstruated sometime later that day and then we're going to go retroactively, then it's a little bit more common than the other opinion, which seemed much less likely that that would happen, right? Where it was immediately after. But in any case, you say tumat meit is just not so common. Therefore, even if you say dechuya, it's overridden, but still there, we still don't have to worry about it. Itmar. Now we're going to talk about this basic machloket, and we'll get started on this today. We'll finish up with it next class. Tumat hamet. Rav Nachman amar hutrahi b'tzibur. Rav Sheshet amar dechuyahi b'tzibur. Rav Nachman says it's permitted entirely, and Rav Sheshet says it's overridden. The first reading is like this. We're going to have two options of what exactly their debate is about this. So if you say, right, if there is, remember they went as a group, a whole big family would go and it was their turn to do the mishmar. So if in that group of people, there's both tmeim and toholim, even if you say Tuma is permitted, we're still going to say if there's pure people to do it, better they do it. Even if you go far as to say it's as if there's no Tuma here, still we're going to say, at least according to the first reading, that better to have the pure people do it. The machloket is, let's say the entire family is tameh. Do we have to go find a different family to work this week? Do we have to switch the rotations so that we end up with pure people? If you say Tumahutra, no, it's over. It's fine. It's as if it's not here. It's permitted entirely. If you say it's overridden, then better we could go try to find someone else. Rav Nachman Amar. So again, here we're going to see the two options. Heter hibitzibor v'lo mahadrinan. It's totally permitted. You don't need to go looking any farther. Rav Sheshet Amar duchuyu hibitzibor umahadrinan. It's just overridden, so better to find someone else. That's the first reading. But Ikad Amre, there's a second reading. Even when that family whose rotation it is that week, even if there's a mix of people there, still they're going to have a debate. Rav Nachman Amar, Avdeinam explained, Rav Nachman's going to say, it's hutra, it's as if they're not tameh, therefore they can do the work. Because anything that's needed for communal obligation, we override Tuma, I shouldn't say override, we wipe out Tuma entirely. It's as if it's not there. Whereas Rav Sheshet will obviously say, no, it's overridden and better to have the pure people do it. With that, we'll finish for today. We're going to see tomorrow what their sources are for this. So have a Shabbat Shalom or a Shavua Tov. We'll pick up from there.